John Wayne and Clint Eastwood are both legends of the Western genre, so you would think Wayne and Eastwood would have been best buds. After all, they seem to have a lot in common. Despite the fact they both contributed heavily to the development of the Western and frequently played similar types of roles, they couldn't stand each other. So keep watching to learn about the nasty feud that developed between these two Hollywood heavyweights. Facts First presents why John Wayne felt threatened by Clint Eastwood. Two distinct visions. Eastwood directed and starred in the 1973 film High Plains Drifter. Although the film is now considered a timeless classic, John Wayne couldn't stand it. Since Wayne was Eastwood's senior and had been an icon in the genre for quite some time, Wayne's hatred for High Plains Drifter could arguably be seen as a moment where he attempted to knock Eastwood down a few pegs. It's fairly obvious he felt threatened by the up-and-coming star, and who could blame him? For years, Wayne had been the reigning king of the Western. So to see a young hotshot come out of nowhere and become the new hot thing, it must have been a bitter pill to swallow. High Plains Drifter was the second film Eastwood directed, and it was released at the peak of his popularity, just 2 years after his crime thriller Dirty Harry firmly established him as a pop culture mover and shaker. Eastwood's filmmaking, right out of the gate, was a tour de force, and John Wayne no doubt felt his position at the top of the Western world was put into jeopardy. High Plains Drifter was met with critical acclaim. The film tells the tale of a mysterious stranger convinced by a town to defend them against a triad of sinister crooks. While Eastwood's character agrees to help the townfolk, his motives aren't entirely pure. Eastwood revealed in his memoir, Ride, Boldy, Ride, The Evolution of the American Western, that while critics seemed to have nothing but praise for the film, there was one particular cowboy who wasn't singing its praises. Apparently, Wayne sent Eastwood a scathing letter complaining the film wasn't really about the people who pioneered the West. While Wayne was getting bent out of shape because of supposed historical inaccuracies, Eastwood was never really trying to go for authenticity. He was a young artist at the time, trying to take the next generation of Westerns in a new direction. Since Wayne was part of the old guard, it's not surprising he took offense to the liberties Eastwood was taking. In his book, Eastwood clarified that when making High Plains Drifter, he intended for it to be taken as a fable. It wasn't meant to depict the real-life drudgery that was pioneer life, nor was it supposed to be about the settling of the Western frontier. Eastwood's Drifter was far more dark and violent than Wayne's films typically were. In your average John Wayne film, you'd essentially get a grab bag of tropes about good versus evil. The characters he would play usually conquered the forces of evil with their innate goodness as their primary weapon. They hardly ever needed to pick up a gun to bring about order, nor did they have to scare people with their intimidating presence. Eastwood, on the other hand, often played characters who were more dark and broody, exceptionally mysterious, mostly silent, and far more violent. Clint tried to give audiences action-packed adventures dripping in style. He was far less interested in providing viewers with a history lesson, and that's okay. That's what art is all about, taking risks, experimenting, and breaking new ground. It's not hard to see how, as time passed, Eastwood and Wayne began to see each other as occupying two different creative realms. As Eastwood stepped into his element and found his directorial niche, Wayne leaned even further into his cowboy image. And while Eastwood spent more and more time taking the behind-the-camera director seat following the height of his acting career, Wayne played his cards quite differently. Apparently, Wayne took a bit of that old cliched Western dialogue, "This town ain't big enough for the two of us," to heart. Since he came from a different generation of cinema than Eastwood, he felt like it was his duty to uphold certain ideals the younger crowd was beginning to question and outright abandon. Wayne was sensitive about what he thought to be the cultural shift towards nihilism. Since morals and values are what defined his career and the iconic characters he played, it's not surprising he felt so threatened by Eastwood. It's likely he didn't really even have a problem with Clint as a person per se, but rather he took issue with what he felt he represented. There was a changing of the guard taking place, and Wayne probably felt like he was in danger of being tossed into the trash. When Dirty Harry was in pre-production, Wayne actually turned down the lead role. Since that film turned Eastwood into a superstar, it's possible Wayne felt some resentment. This probably wasn't the source of their beef, but it probably didn't help things either. Clint and John never got a chance to work together. Maybe if they had, they would have been able to find more common ground. Despite never appearing on screen together, they did meet once when Clint visited the set of Wayne's 1976 film, The Shootist. Even then, Eastwood could see the writing on the wall. While John continued to appear in what he called comfort westerns, some of which were still moneymakers, it was evident a shift was taking place. Audiences wanted something new. Wayne turned down an opportunity to work with Eastwood. In the early 70s, an attempt was made to bring these two Western icons together on screen. Even though they represented two distinct eras, Larry Cohen, a director best known for B films like Q, The Winged Serpent, and The Stuff, suspected they could have shared quite a bit of chemistry on screen if given the right script. Cohen got to work and came up with a script for a Western titled The Hostiles. The plot focused on a gambler who won half of the estate of an older gentleman. Eastwood was supposed to play the gambler, while Wayne would play the older man. After he was told about the concept, Eastwood expressed interest, but Wayne outright rejected the role. Not only did he not like the script, he couldn't stand Eastwood as an actor and director. He also didn't care for how the film's script reflected the shifting trends that were transforming the Western genre. Needless to say, The Hostiles never ended up getting made. Although years later, in 2009, a version of the film was adapted into a TV movie called The Gambler, the Girl, and the Gunslinger. Sadly, the world never got a chance to see the two biggest giants of the Western world on screen together. Eastwood still isn't afraid of change. John Wayne largely stuck to his guns and kept doing the kinds of roles and films he was familiar with in his later years. He passed away at age 72 in 1979, and with his death came the end of an era. He represented the tail end of the old-school Western genre, and while many of the films he appeared in are considered classics, he never really experimented too much with his formula. Eastwood, on the other hand, has never stopped changing, growing, developing, and experimenting. He might have gotten his start as a B-movie and Western star, but that merely represented one phase of his artistic journey. He's now a two-time Academy Award winner for Best Director, in addition to being a two-time winner of the Directors Guild of America Audience Award for Best Director. Over the years, he's made films spanning many different genres and themes. Today, he's considered to be right up there with greats like Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese. Throughout his long, storied career, Eastwood has fought against expectations to forge his own path, and he's become one of the great filmmakers of his generation. It's refreshing that Eastwood broke out of his Western shell and wasn't afraid to venture into unknown waters. If he hadn't, we would never have gotten films like Space Cowboys, $1 Million Baby, or Changeling. As a filmmaker, he's helped guide other actors through the path to greatness. Many of the people he's worked with have gone on to win Academy Awards, and while they might have done so on their own, it's obvious Eastwood's influence has played a large role in their development. Unlike Wayne, who was staunchly opposed to change, Eastwood has routinely leaned into it. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know John Wayne couldn't stand Clint Eastwood and felt threatened by him? Let us know in the comments section below.